In Australia, we are ahead of the curve. We give ourselves a very hard time, but actually our organisations are very determined. You actually pick areas to research, get them in place, get them right. If you look at in our financial services sector, our ability to be able to process complex financial transactions and do it in a relatively automated way, we're definitely ahead of the curve. In fact, the Australian payments sector, which touches retail, has definitely been amongst the best in the world. But we've also been the first to hit some of the barriers. Amongst the first to realise that no matter how much you automate, unfortunately humans get involved. The biggest problem to digital retail are digital customers. People at absolute best, if you do something like a mortgage or buy that new Galaxy, you get about 6 out of 10 going through as you expect. 4 out of 10 times something goes wrong. And that's where you want the great customer service. That's where you need people who are really, really well trained to be able to solve the problem. And those are the banks, the telcos, and now the retailers who are getting it right, who are getting that 4 out of 10 right, because it's not the same 4 people every time. All of us are that 4 people at some point in our in every interaction that we have.
Yeah. So, I mean, Paul, you talked about growing the pie. I mean, can retail in this particular climate, can you grow the retail pie?
Well, I believe you can. I mean, I think the first thing is, some of the good news is we're seeing a lot of the shopping dollars stay in Australia. We're seeing a very, very powerful trend, up and around 30% in the bad days of leakage of the shopping dollar offshore. It's now close to 15 and heading down. Now, some would say that's the Aussie dollar that's moved in our favour. I really believe it's about the local industry meeting and starting to exceed that offshore offer in many ways, obviously not just price, but service, 3-hour delivery, quick and nimble returns. So I think we've got a good news story there. And in terms of growing the pie, as Richard said, it's a $300 billion business. I mean, the global opportunity, we've tended to focus on the threat of the invasion. I think we need to do a bit of invading ourselves, and we're seeing some terrific Aussie retailers kicking some serious goals offshore, and I think that will accelerate as well. So that's one way to take it. Do you have some examples? On the small end of town, I've referenced Shoes of Prey, Black Milk. These are edgy retailers in niche, but increasingly our iconic brands, whether it be a Cotton On or a Country Road or a Flight Centre, Smiggle, these are brands that are moving very quickly into the global market and building some significant traction at pace. And I think that's set to accelerate. But I think, celebrating Australian retail, it's time. And in fact, I mean, while I've got Richard here, Richard floated the idea some years ago of a shopping festival that they run in Dubai. And I think it's probably time for Melbourne to get into that as well.
Right.
Watch the space.
So, Richard, Paul just mentioned then, sort of the service and 3-hour delivery and these kind of things. How important is that delivery end of the digital experience? I mean, look, you've come from obviously Australia Post, where this was.
And I think one of the most interesting pieces of research is that most people judge their experience of an online retailer actually not by the range of goods and the services and things that are available on the site, but they judge it, did my parcel arrive like the retailer said it would? And most online retailers actually outsource that to Australia Post or to somebody else. And so I think, Paul, you're spot on with that observation that as a retailer, selling online, getting the distribution and fulfillment right and the returns process right is an absolutely critical, essential part of what drives good e-commerce retail. And again, it's often said in online shopping circles that you can run a very good online business, but the place you'll lose your shirt is actually in the fulfillment operation.
In a more recent report you've done, Robert, and forgive me, I can't remember the title of it, the latest report.
The Digital Divide?
The Digital Divide, I should have been able to remember that. You did a little bit of work with Westfield in that, as a case study, and just talking about this convergence of physical and digital. How's Westfield responding, with their malls, their physical presence?
So what we're seeing is exactly this point of shopping malls are also having to reinvent themselves to actually say, okay, what is our role in the process, and so saying, what are all their touch points? So the idea of creating a digital agent that takes part in the shopping experience. So they've been experimenting with their relationship between their tenants, the relationship with the customer, and actually effectively acting as a value add to that with the mobile device. When you walk in, and knowing where you are in the store, in the shopping centre as well.
But they're also, I mean, I guess embracing click and collect as well. And
yes, and so actually, but again, this comes to some of the debate that Richard's hitting on. Yeah, how much will stores actually want the shopping centre? You would want somebody else to actually own that part of experience, and how much will they want to own it themselves? Yeah, taking an enormous risk of predicting what's happening to technology over the next 2 to 10 years, and going on the record. And I've been wrong before in past technology predictions, but yeah, there's 3 technologies hitting us that actually change the whole game, and change the cost equation. First of all, that kiosk that retailers experimented with over the last 15 years is getting legs and moving around the store. It's becoming robots. So we've seen Lowe's, we've seen other retailers creating robots that greet you at the front door and can actually go with you. That's about 2 years to maturity. And again, what's been interesting is how quickly customers get comfortable with that. Whether or not the shopping centre owns that and becomes a retail that you go through a shopping centre, or whether the store owns that, whether Myer owns that, and it stays within the store, is going to be part of that debate. The second is getting rid of the actual checkout process itself. So again, there's technologies that are rapidly maturing to be able to get the cost of tagging goods to a point where the act of picking it up and carrying it out the store actually is the act of buying. So again, just take that friction out of the equation. Doesn't mean not dealing with humans, just takes the friction of having to queue up at a cash register when you've made the purchase. And then the third...
Just explain how that would happen.
So at the point where every item of goods has some form of tagging, it's really the pharmaceutical companies who are pioneering this through their work on tagging drugs. The cost of tagging goods drops to a point where every item in the store, no matter how small, no matter how low cost, can be tagged. So once I've identified myself and I'm in the store, I can actually have the proximity between the goods and myself, and I can effectively have signed a digital contract to say that the goods I walk out with are the goods that I've deemed to have purchased. And of course, I've got all sorts of mechanisms that people will have to experiment to get right, to be able to make sure that we have a reconciliation between those two. But that frustration of self-checkout, or the frustration of finding a staff member to actually take my money, will disappear out of the equation, and everybody can concentrate on the service, which won't all be robots. Robots have a role. They won't have that. They have to. That exception becomes a real focus, which is the high service. Then the third and final technology, which is a little bit further out, but less than 10 years, is the driverless car. Again, the Uber experience of having deliveries, to the point where if I've got a robot picking my goods and I've got a robot putting it into a vehicle, even if I've gone and helped choose it, but it's something large, being able to actually automate the process of saying, I'm 45. In the next 45 minutes, I want the goods, so it's going to get picked, it's going to get dropped into a vehicle, and it's going to drive to me, and it doesn't need a human being involved in the process. A lot of the queuing goes out and becomes a capital equation of how much delivery equipment can I have, which in itself may well be outsourced, very much an UberX style delivery service.
Are you going to put robots in, Richard?
It's a long way off, I think.
Is it?
Certainly, I mean, perhaps that was a bit hasty. If you look at picking technology and the way automated DCs and so on, that technology is already there. Now, because we've been adopting an in-store fulfillment model, we don't use robotic picking because we don't have a DC specifically for that. But it's very easy to see how that can easily come to pass, and certainly we have, directionally, that is exactly where we would be going, but our focus at the moment is much more on the customer experience side and getting the stores right and getting the consumer interface right, whereas I'm suggesting that the first port of call for robotics is typically in the supply chain and the back-end operations rather than in the interface with the customer.
We were having a conversation before, just when we were having coffee here, and we were talking about the changes you're talking about, NFC sort of coming in. We were also talking about the fact that stores, as Richard has mentioned, they want to personalise the service, they know a lot about you. Is there a point where that sort of personalisation, where we have given up a lot of privacy, but where it does go a little bit too far, and people do just want to go back to a pure transactional relationship with their retailer, or are people comfortable giving away a lot of information to their retailers. Paul, do you?
I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation as things change and iterate. My view is that people will trade information for relevance or for something in return. So we'll give up information. As long as we get something, there's no free lunch. You want something from me, what's in return? And I think for retailers, the big prize is relevance. We'll give you relevance if you give us your information. And I also think generational transition is less concerned about, sort of the bogeyman privacy issues. So I think generally the trend will be, obviously there'll be boundaries and parameters and there'll be law. But in broad terms, I think it's, people want to be gotten and they want to be understood.
So how do retailers know where those boundaries are? I mean, are we still trying to find them, or are they going to keep shifting?
No, I think invariably in conversation with the customer. I mean, it's Richard referenced the customer is well and truly king, and they'll tell us how far they're prepared to go and what they're prepared to give up. And I think we've just got to, as an industry, heed those parameters and boundaries. But I think, location-based marketing seems to be one of those real opportunities where customers want to be understood in a whole way, and they have to give up something to get that return. But it's very much a work in progress and a very exciting iteration.
Yeah. Do you feel this?
Yeah, I mean, a good example actually, just in the hub that we've just launched, one of the features I didn't mention earlier is that it has an ability to connect with shoppers such that we know who they are when they approach the hub area. We can reference that back to our knowledge about the customer through our loyalty program, and we can then engage.
How do you know that? When they
because when they come in and log on to the Wi-Fi, which is an automatic process, we know that device as an individual device, which tells us who that individual is, which allows us then to reference that back to put in front of that customer offers that are relevant to the time and place that they're standing and things that we've got going on within the store.
And they'll get those on their phone?
They get those on their mobile
text
phone.
messages.
This is a good example of the sort of innovation that we're experimenting with at the moment as part of the hub environment. It's one of the features, if you like.
Exciting.
But it's at the vanguard of something which is much bigger, this idea that as we go about our daily lives, our lives become increasingly influenced by things that are very relevant to us. And it helps us become relevant as a retailer if we are understanding the customer and interfacing with them, using technology, if you like, to build that experience to the point where it becomes seamless. There is a point in all of this journey, actually, where the technology actually becomes invisible.
It disappears.
And what you've created is a physical-digital fusion to the extent that people feel it is just personal and just physical and just the traditional retail experience that they come to love. And that's when technology is really working for you, when it's completely invisible in your business.